Eric and I set out to continue our conversation about racism in America by talking with Brandon Knight, the Vice President of Contact Center Sales at Teleris. We met with Brandon earlier this week to have a chat about how that conversation might go, but early in the call we realized that the conversation had already started, so we went ahead and hit record. We ended up with over an hour and 15 minutes of amazing insight from Brandon, and we want to share it all with you. To make it a little bit more consumable, we've broken it up into some smaller chunks, and we're happy to share the first part with you today.
That analogy of like, oh, wait a minute, it is in this case, 13% of American society that is predominantly at risk. They are the one that Jesus went for.
They're the
That
one that
that
got
was
away.
the analogy that really resonated with me.
Yeah, and it's that thing also that misnomer that Black Lives Matters means that Blue Lives don't. Like
Correct.
who decided that? Who decided that I either had to be for the police or for Black people? Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, like I am a learned individual. I am mature. I can appreciate law enforcement and still want Black people to not be killed. Okay, you don't have to pick one or the other. And you talk about the Black Lives Matter thing. The way I explain it to people is I sit down with my family. I have four beautiful daughters that still live at home. I sit down with my wife. We're having dinner. We're enjoying ourselves. My neighbor comes over to have a chat with me. My wife's going to say, "Would you like to eat?" And it's not because she doesn't want everybody else is already eating. So the question is not going to, she's not going to pose the question to the girls at the table saying, do you want some food? They already have food. She's going to ask the guests if they want food. And that's the thing I'm trying to get people to understand. We're not saying that because Black Lives Matters, no one else's life doesn't matter. We're saying you're not, for the most part, if you get pulled over by the police for speeding or even for doing nothing, your greatest fear is, am I going to get a ticket? Am I going to have to go to court? Am I going to get some points?
Right.
That's the least of my concerns, and I'm just telling you as a person who has happened to. That's not my concern. I have to size up the actual officer that pulls me over to see if they have any bent towards me already, to see what attitude they approach me with, to see if their hand is if they've unbuckled their weapon already. Like I got to look at all those things.
Right.
Forget about the fact that my license is valid, my insurance is paid, you know what I mean? None of that matters.
Yeah.
So it's a different thought process.
I will say, I don't know what caused America to open up because this has happened so many times.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I think for me, I've heard the stories of Black men and Black women talking to their 16, 17, 18-year-old children about this is how you go about getting pulled over.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say it's gone in and gone in one ear and out the other, but it hasn't stuck. But do you know Ronell Richards in Atlanta?
I know the name.
So Ronell is an agent, and I think a pretty successful one in the Atlanta area. He and I become friends. Posted something on Facebook or LinkedIn, walking through that story of having to have that conversation with his children, and I think it stuck for the first time because that was someone that I knew.
Yes.
Having to have this conversation.
Yes.
So
yeah.
I think. Yeah, go ahead.
I did that for a whole youth church group, and I was embarrassed at first, and I actually told the pastor no. When I was in Florida, he asked me to do it, and I said no. I was defiant. I was like, why should they have to learn how to do that? Why can't they? I mean, they're subject. You know the whole deal. I mean, they're covered by the same Constitution as everybody else. They have the same rights. Why do we have to teach them that? And I was really angry at first. Um, and being a good pastor, he kind of he brought me around and helped me understand. He said, well, you have to, the indignation is good, and you have to fight those things in the right format, but you got to keep the kids alive in the meantime.
Mm.
So we're not saying that we like it or it's appropriate, but we're saying we have to do that. So I did. I went there and I taught them, and it's because, and we talked about this. I have a unique perspective in the sense that on one side, I'm a Black male who was raised in the inner city. It don't get no darker and no rundown homish than inner North Philadelphia, right? I came up with that. I can tell you, I literally never saw a police officer until I was in high school, right? Like never in my neighborhood. So it wasn't even about what type of relationship I had. They didn't come to our neighborhood. It wasn't a thing, right? So I grew up that way, and I have my own perceptions. I had my own perceptions and my own perspective based on the people I grew around and what everybody said, and watching people live and die in my neighborhood with no intervention from police, ambulance, or anything else. Like, we have our own rules. Different people are in charge. It's a whole little Lord of the Flies type thing going on, right? That I was raised in. And then you come full circle where I've spent 15 years of my life in law enforcement in 2 different states, you know? So I've been on the streets, I've driven the car, I've pulled people, all of it.
So I think there's an element, and Aaron and I had talked in kind of preparing for this of, we want to have a conversation with Brandon, in large part because you're a leader in the industry. You happen to be a Black guy, which of course gives a very different perspective than Aaron and I have. But you have a whole different perspective as a Black male in law enforcement. So what was your experience as in that as a Black officer? Yeah. What does that look like?
Yeah, you got me start thinking, who's going to see this video now? It's very interesting because I'm gonna own a couple of things. Obviously, you can't miss that I'm a Black person, right? I'm a minority, and that has its own things. I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you there's not such thing as a blue line. Right? I mean, there is a brotherhood, there is a camaraderie, it's real, because when you're literally in life and death situations on a constant basis, you have no choice but to form, it's very much like being in the military and being deployed. I mean, you depend on that person. And the rule is, no matter what happens, just get home at the end of the night. That's the deal. Right? And so you have to depend on that person. You spend a lot of time with that person in highly stressful situations a lot of the time. So you can't get away from that, right? That's real, that happens, and you build that. The odd thing about it is, and again, going back to someone like, I grew up in North Philly, so I came with street cred in the Black community, right? Because I was raised there. But there's a segment of the community that believes that, okay, because remember I talked earlier, and I don't even know if we were recording at the time, we talked about there's this misnomer that you can't be Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter at the same time. Like, you have to be one or the other. Like, I can't have an appreciation for police officers and their lives and what they do every day and support Black people at the same time. That's idiotic. Okay, first of all, that's just an immature mindset. All right. You can appreciate and respect what they have to do every day, and you cannot want to die. Okay, and you cannot want your brothers to be killed because of what they look like. So for me, it's interesting because now I have a new thing where the street cred is kind of challenged in certain parts of the Black community. If you think police officers are okay, like, if you don't lump all police officers together and think they're all bad, then you don't get it, you don't understand, or you're not Black enough, right? Or you haven't had it happen to you, or whatever the things that they want to say. It's the whole like Uncle Tom theory, right? And we talk about that even being. I had 2 executives I was having a conversation with yesterday, similar issue, because we are Black men. We came up however we came up. We've been blessed. We don't live that way now. You know what I'm saying? I live in a nice neighborhood, got a couple fairly decent cars. I have a career, and for some people that means, well, you're not Black now. Like, think about that mentality. That a Black person would see me as not being Black simply because I don't live that way anymore. And I'm not out flipping cars and setting buildings on fire and stuff like that. That means I somehow am not in touch with being black, as if you could detach yourself from that, as if I could take away the last, 5 decades and put them in a corner somewhere.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just crazy to me that people have this one way or the other thing. I'm glad. I mean, you guys joked about having two white guys doing a video, right, about what's going on, but honestly, that's what has to happen for real change. This has to become a non-black problem.
Right.
That it has to. Leaving it just being a black problem or an issue that faces the black community will not impact the change that we need to see.